Hey, it's Curly. It's that time again to take a look at the brand new Divine Set 2 that releases today overseas. And I wanted to just, take a look and express my first impressions on all the decks that were supported or all the decks that came out brand new from this set. So we have the same tiers as we did last time. We have ourselves Best in Set, which is just what I believe to be the best deck to come out of this set. It doesn't really take into consideration any other cards that were not supported in the set. Specifically, it's just the things that I believe coming out of this set are the best. Strong first impression is that I feel very strongly about this deck. I feel it might do pretty well, just based on my first impression. Likewise, solid is I feel, pretty good about it. And we've added, I think, a new tier. I don't think I had this last time, which is sad first impression, which are any decks that I, tried out for the first time or took a look at the support and was kind of disappointed about. Doesn't mean that these are per se bad or anything like that. It's just my first impression was not very good on them. So we have these cards here. These should be all the cards that are supported with one or two exceptions here, and we'll start with all of the older cards from before Divines that got support. And we'll start out here with Kyouka. Kyouka is a deck that I played a little bit when she first came out, but that I didn't like sort of how the deck played out completely. And it got some support in Lyrical 4, and it got a promo, and then now they got a good wave of support in Divine Set 2 as well. And I've actually had some time to actually mess around with this. I'll also try to note which decks I myself really tested a lot, which ones I only tested a little bit, and which ones I just haven't tested at all. Right, I'll try to be as explicitly clear about that. Kyouka, I did test a fair amount, and I actually have a really strong impression of Kyouka coming out of DBZ. I keep saying DBZ when it's DZBT02, but whatever. Coming out of Set 2, I have a really strong impression of Kyouka. The deck has this insane loop that you can do now. It makes it so much easier for you to be able to restand your restanders. They fixed the stole issue within the deck and also allowed the deck to amass a bit of a hand. And it's also a lot more consistent because they give it a card that just flat out lets them search their magazine, of which they have 2 now. So I think Kyouka's, looking really strong. Whether or not she'll do well is a different question, but I think very strongly of her coming out of Set 2. Likewise, I do the same, I think the same for Solarion. Solarion I got to test out quite a bit. He also got a big wave of support here. I think he got 4 cards in this set, and that actually helps out the deck a lot. One of the things this deck suffered the most with is that it always ran out of resources, because mainly it would run out of soul, I think was one of the biggest issues, and they gave them this insane grade 2 that not only does it countercharge and put itself into soul, but it also lets them draw, if I'm remembering correctly. So it just does everything for the deck. It does a lot of things. So this deck is actually in a really solid spot now, because it actually has pretty hefty attacks that I can throw at you, because Solarion can, if it reveals a normal unit at the beginning of the battle, it can then give everyone 5k. Then it can, when it attacks, it can call out that normal unit that you stacked. And that normal unit usually gets an ability if it's called out from the deck, or if it was, called out if you revealed the thing, or whatever the heck. So this is actually a pretty nice little deck. I tried out Solarion early on when it came out, was not impressed, and I 100% think this deck is working so much better right now. I might even be as bold to say that I think this deck is in a much better spot than Hexorb right now, which a lot of people compared it to when they both came out, because Hexorb Aquamarine came out in the same set as this, and they thought Solarion was better Hexorb, but it turned out no, that is not the case. Now I actually think that might be the case. Then next up, I guess not too much of a surprise, but I might even be as bold to put it up here. I don't know. I haven't tested it out too much to say that at least, but I've tested it a decent amount. Prison got 2 cards here. I think only 2 cards directly. A lot of these decks also got a lot of support indirectly, such as the Order Cyclers and stuff like that, but we'll talk about that when it's relevant. It's not really relevant for Prison, but Prison got an insane card that lets them Energy Blast 3 on place to imprison, I think, either on field or drop. I don't remember which one of the two. And if you did, you draw a card, And then whenever your Sarevsael attacks, you can, if you have 3 or more in prison, it gets plus 10k. But if you have 5 or more, you can counterblast one to restand. So now they have access to multi-attack, which is huge, because this deck, you know, this already restricted you from playing the way you want to play. It messes around with the resources. Now they can attack you multiple times, very easily now get stuff into prison as well with this grade 2, and also it can restand with a crit, because Pure Light can give them a crit if you have 10 or more. So this is going to be pretty nasty, I think, coming into set 2. I still think like Prison plays pretty well into some of the decks that are there. I don't know how it plays with some of what will end up being the top dogs out of this set, but it in a bubble by itself at face value, Prison's looking pretty good. Heroes got a, you know, decent support here. They got 2 cards. They got a grade 1 that says on place, Energy Blast, I think 3 to call something that's in your base, which is pretty good, because now we have ourselves a free scout that we don't have to discard cards for. We still have the option to do so, so we can activate the skill of Bolt Source and whatnot. And then they got another grade 2 that I'm not a big fan of, because he says like, I think he gets like 5 or 10k if you have a certain number of bases. But then he also says that it's probably 5. If it was 10k, I think I'd probably like him a lot more. But then he also says that when he attacks, I think at the end of the battle, you can restand any number of your bases and then soul charge equal to that number or something like that. So it allows your bases to restand. But that was never really that big of an issue, to be honest. It might be something that comes up. I don't know. It's a nice card to have in the card pool for heroes. Whether or not it'll see play, I don't know. The new grade 1 will be. I surprisingly don't have that strong of an impression of the deck. I think it's good. The new support card I think is really good, but I don't think it necessarily pushes the deck up to here. I might be wrong. I didn't test it out too extensively, because when it comes to the decks that I personally play and really like, I test them out a little bit, and then I just wait for them to come out in English. I don't want to essentially spoil all the fun for me right off the get-go. Unica spoiled a lot of fun for me. She got an insane card here that supposedly directly supports her in the Bifrons, which is a new generic. It's essentially like the new Swirler, I guess, if I'm so bold to say it. The new Swirler for Dark States, because it says on place from hand, you counterblast 1, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put 1 into soul, 1 into hand, 1 into drop. So this helps out with, you know, this, because you can pull out your crits, put them to soul and drop and whatnot. But it also has a sort of Unica specific effect that I don't remember off the top of my head. So she has a skill that says, if your Vanguard is Alma Adjuster specifically, Soul Blast 1, Energy Blast 3, search your deck for up to 1 Asteroa card with Asteroa in its card name, so that's either the original one or the masked one, or 1 critical, put into your soul and shuffle your deck. And then if you did do that, you choose a card with a different card name from this unit from your drop and call it to Rearguard Circle. So it just extends a little bit, allows you to have some drop recursion, which is alright. I tried it out, I was not impressed in just overall what the whole package has now, because they've received a good amount of support over time. They have the promo, they have the Bifrons, and they got another card as well. Still not super impressed with Asteroa. It seems like they really want you to play the mass variant strictly. I was always a fan of like the original Asteroa Unica, but it seems like they specifically want you to go to the mass version. Another person that made me really sad was Eugene. Eugene got, I think, mainly just 1 card of support, if I can remember, and a promo card. The promo card is pretty solid. It's like on place for Gandeeva or for Eugene. You can Energy Blast, retire something, and if not, you get 5k or draw or something like that. And then it also restands, I think after you rest it or when something's retired, something like that. So it helps out with Eugene. And then they got this very interesting grade 2 that I think allows you to restand as well. I tried it out and it was one of those miserable experiences I had. I feel like the support is good. Maybe I'm just not a Eugene Chad, but I was not happy about it. Barrow got 1 whole ass card. And that is it directly, right? I'm still on the fence whether or not I want to play Bifrons in this deck, but he got 1 whole ass card, which was, I forget his name. He is the Hardening Insight. So this card is pretty cool because all it really does is replace Phantasm Magician Curtis. We've been playing Curtis since set 1. We can finally put that guy back in our binder. Because it says on place, if you have Baromagnes, you Energy Blast 2, put 2 cards, 2 normal units from your drop onto the bottom of your deck to then Soul Charge 2. You don't actually have to put all the cards, you do up to 2. So this allows you to Soul Charge without decking out, but it also allows you mainly to Soul Charge 2 on a grade 2 body. So now you have something that is Curtis in terms of Soul Charging, but is on grade 2, so it has some value in hand because it has 5k shield. But also, you can also intercept, but also it has a cost tied to it. So one of the biggest issues with Curtis, even though he was a nice, a nice 13k body, you call him out, you have to Soul Charge. This has a cost behind it, so you don't have to Soul Charge, which is really nice. But he also has another skill that essentially says if you Soul Charge 3 or more cards this turn, he gets plus 15k. So he's a nice backup beater if you don't have your Lilac Lasher. I've tried the deck out. It's nice to finally play a Barrow like a normal deck with normal triggers, not having to play taking out my heals and my PGs to sort of do anything. I like it a lot. But it's kind of the same thing in Heroes where I kind of just tested it a bit and I'll come back to it when it actually releases. But I have a pretty good, strong impression of that. I may be biased, but I don't care. I have a pretty solid impression on Jheva. They got one card here that says when it overdresses, you Soul Blast Countercharge. And also when you discard it, you can choose, I think, a Prayer Dragon from your drop and add it to your hand. So that's pretty strong because it works really well with this skill. So I think that's pretty solid. The deck was already doing, decently well coming out of set 13. We'll see where it goes. Gandeeva, it got some interesting cards. I'm going to put it in sad. Not so much because it makes me sad, but just because it was kind of whatever. They got a grade 1 that allows you to extend where it's on place retire, and if you don't retire, look at the top 3 and call something, which is pretty interesting. And also got a grade 2 that doesn't directly support it, I think, but it just says it binds itself after it attacks or something like that, which is alright. I don't know if it's going to push the deck anywhere specifically, but I just didn't really care to test it, to be honest. I did not test the Orfist mass stuff either, but it was kind of whatever, because all they got was a grade 1 that says if you play a Shadow Army token in the same column, it resands. And then they got a promo that says on place Energy Blast 3. Look at the top 7 for a grade 3 or a world card, grade 3 without Regalius. So that's pretty interesting, gives you a lot more consistency. And it gets 5k shield also. So it's alright, but it's kind of whatever. Flagburg, I actually did get the test. Was not very happy with the results, to be honest with you. It got 2 cards. It got a grade 2 that's really cool, because he says basically he gets boost if you have Flagburg. So he's a grade 2, 10k booster. We have that becoming a thing now, which is pretty cool. Kyouka has one of those as well. But then it also says that it goes into Soul at the end of the battle, that it boosted and gives someone 5k. Then they got a grade 1, a triple rare that says on place, Energy Charge 2 from hand, if you play from hand. Then at the beginning of your battle, you can Soul Blast 1, choose a unit, and it gets the ability that when it attacks the Vanguard, I think, or maybe just attacks period, it gets an additional 5k. So that's pretty sick. However, Flagburg is this insane resource hog that needs so many resources to make it work. So something that Soul Blasts and doesn't really increase your number of attacks is kind of tough. The scaling that does is kind of cute, especially if you get a lot of them. But I tried it out. It seemed like there's a lot of potential there, but I'm not seeing it at this point in time. Next up, we have Wilista. Wilista is one of the caveats that I have here. She didn't directly receive any support. The only thing that she received is that she got the restriction of hers removed. Gandeeva still has his restriction, but in Japanese at least, the Japanese format, Wilista is no longer restricted to having Vash Blonde and what's her name? There's a grade 1 that allows you to draw when you play the order. They no longer have that restricted. What does that mean for the deck? I don't know. I didn't get to test it out yet. They did receive support in set 4. Some people think that, it might actually come back to prominence because it has a pretty sizable hand. It could probably deal with some of the threats that we have out there. It was always a good deck. It could draw a lot of cards. It had some pretty sizable attacks. It had restands, So I'll probably just put this on face value on solid, but I haven't looked into it as much. But it's just interesting to know that this might be coming back. Next up, we have stuff that was actually supported in this set that's new. Starting off with the quick start deck bosses. These only received 1 card each of support. Main support, right? Direct support that specifically names them or their archetype. And they all have a grade 1 that have some ability to retire them, maybe pay another cost to retire them as well, and then choose a Persona Ride, a card with the same name as the Vanguard, put it from Solar Drop on the bottom of your deck, and then get an extra effect. So the Triump Dragon one says retire a unit if on your opponent's field, if not, draw a card. I actually tried this out a bit, you know, an upgraded list for set 2, and it's like fine, honestly. It's alright. It still has its issues. It's not a bad deck. I was playing this with this ride line, which we'll talk about in a bit. I'm just gonna call this Virginia for now, and it worked out pretty well. You know, again, this is just sort of in a bubble, not specifically thinking about matchups or the format, but just how the deck itself performs. And it, you know, seems fine. It's a decent little deck. It's whatever. Ultrageist here is one that haven't really been able to enjoy as much. Its grade 1 is pretty interesting because it says choose any unit, any rearguard I should say, from either side of the board and put into soul. So it gives you removal and also giving you something that you can put into your soul from your side. Honestly, I've not been a big fan of this. I feel like you know, a lot of these are super generic, so it kind of just depends on what they have in their card pool. I don't feel like Dark States really has the means to make this deck work right now, but you know, I could be wrong. Sarevsael, whatever, did not test him out too much, but he always kind of just gets whatever scraps Razeal gives him right now, because they're basically very closely tied together, but Razeal just does what he does better. Asturm here actually, I think, got a solid boost, mainly because of the fact that it got his grade 1 allows him to countercharge. There's another card that lets you countercharge in the set, so there's at least 3 grade 1s you can play to countercharge in this deck. Then there's also the other grade 1 that you can use to just flat out the new order cyclers that let you take a order from your deck, put it into drop, and you can play it from your drop that turn. So this gives this deck the ability to just easily get access to its I don't know what it's called, but it's set order, so that you can play it. You know, so this deck might actually be okay. One of the biggest issues it's had is that you got to play this card, the set order, and it's counterblast 1 each time for like no effect. Right? You didn't draw or anything like that to get anything extra. So it's just counterblast 1 constantly to play it, and then you need counterblast 1 for this thing's skill in order to search out to make it big power. But now you countercharge like crazy, so it's not that big of a deal. Christianos is probably the most disappointing of the grade 1s. Probably not. This one was not so great. Yeah, both of these, they weren't so great. The Christianos one, it just says draw a card, essentially. And then I think it gives something 5k or something like that. I think it gives Christianos 5k and then retire it, draw a card. So it's kind of whatever. But by, you know, face value by itself. The Marlean one is kind of whatever. I think it yeah, so it just says Soul Blast, retire itself to put a Marlean back, and then you choose a grade. Oh yeah, so it just says choose a grade 2 or greater from your drop with the same card name as one of your units and put it back to your hand. So it just allows you to add something back to your hand, so it's like fine. I don't really care too much for it. Then next up, we have here the stuff that was introduced the previous set 1, that got supported again, with one exception here, which we'll go over. Welstra did not actually get anything directly supporting it this set. I could be wrong, but I did not see a single piece of Welstra support specifically. There was a lot of indirect stuff, right? Blankade in general got a lot of different cards, a lot of generic tools for the decks to use. Whether or not that'll help Welstra is a different story. I haven't tested it out specifically, mainly because it didn't get anything new. Again, I could be wrong about this. Let me know in the comments if I'm just dead wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. So I don't know how this deck is going to fare, so I'm just going to put it in sad, just for the fact that it didn't get anything. Next up, we have ourselves the Direful Dolls. Androld here. They got 1 card of support. Oh, sorry, 2 cards of support. And I didn't really care too much for the support too much, to be honest. I don't feel like it really did a lot for the deck. I could be wrong about that. They got a grade 1 that energy charges, which is nice. And then they got a grade 2 that Chooses a card from drop to put into soul, which is cool, and then it binds itself. So it's like, it's alright. I don't think it like does anything crazy for the deck. So we'll leave it in sad because I really like this deck and it didn't get anything too crazy. Veleno, on the other hand, we're going to show this all the way up there. They got 3 whole cards. Grade 1, Grade 2, Grade 3. The Grade 3 you can completely ignore. Grade 1 allows you to get your blitzes from drop. Might even give you like 2 of them or something crazy like that. And then the Grade 2 is actually another 10k booster, much like we said here and for Flagburg. It's a 10k booster, which is really nice because it gives you some hefty. It's a 15k booster, technically, because Veleno gives it +5. But then it can also Soul Blast 2 to call something off from drop, which is pretty nifty. So yeah, Vanilla's looking pretty solid, as well as there's some other cards just in general released in the card pool for Circada. Make this might be pretty good. Then Razeal, I think, is one of the best cards, one of the best decks to come out of this set, because he got some pretty good support, in my opinion, in general. So did Keter. I think he's looking out pretty good here. Kysrain got some support. I've heard some things. I've heard that her support is like usable in a lot of other stuff, mainly. I'm just gonna put this in solid. I haven't tested Kysrain specifically. I tested Razeal a bit and Veleno a bit, so that's why I have the general impression of them. Kysrain not. So I'm kind of just going off what I've heard, but mainly what I know from the card pool that she has. I'm just gonna put her in solid based on what her 2 support cards she got. Varga, I feel like didn't really get much. I want to just put him down here and people to misinterpret what these tiers mean and get upset about it. But they just got really 1 card that just turns off intercepts. That's really all it ever does, and it's kind of like whatever. I'm just gonna leave it here because yeah, it's kind of whatever for me. Support wise, I don't feel like it did anything too crazy. But then next up, we have all the brand new decks that are introduced in this set, which were quite a bit, shockingly. So first off, we've got Rotovisor, which is the brand new Brancate line, which is straight up Nova Grapplers. Vanguard attacks restand your rear guard. It is not very good, unfortunately. As a Nova Grappler player, I'm here to tell you, yeah, this deck is kind of rough coming out the get-go. It has that Brancate issue where it relies on a set order that is a Grade 2, and you have no way to cheat it out. It's like basically Heroes, how they were with a, you know, if they got their set order and everything, they were great once they got all 3 of them, but they had no way to do that before turn 3. But Heroes had a lot better coming out the box than Rotovisor does. Rotovisor doesn't really have a lot of cards either to its name. It doesn't have any like main attackers even. So this is definitely something that is like an initial wave, and I'm sure it'll get better in the future. The skill to Vanguard could be way better because it just yeah, and the order itself could also be way better because all it does is say that so the Vanguard just says when he attacks, counterblast 2 to restand, you know, units equal to how many of the set order you have in play, and then if you did 3, give them 5k, and then it also says if you have 3 of them, give I think your front row 5k. But it also says the order says that whenever one of your cards with Rotovisor specifically in the name attacks, you can rest it and give that card the ability that if it hits, it either counter charges or energy charges. So it's like Nova Grappler on hit stuff. Not great. Xeora doesn't really do much. You just play it and then like maybe if you hit, but then you also don't have a lot of Rotovisor names to put to it. So this is definitely something that'll get better in the future, but right now it's not very good. GraiAndra, I tested out quite a bit, did a whole video on that. And I want to say I have a strong impression on it. Yeah, I'll say I have a strong impression on it. I like the deck a lot. It was a lot of fun. I think it's a pretty solid deck. I don't know, you know, how well it does into other stuff, but it's a fun deck. I like it a lot. I'm very much looking forward to playing this. Next up, we have ourselves Liael here. I did test this recently because it just got revealed. Played tested it quite a bit. I think this deck is like solid. It's a good deck. It has a couple of issues, right? One is that, so what it does is when it attacks, you counterblast 1, choose one of your units, bind it, and then from your deck call something with the same name as it. So it has that sort of Murakumo, Megaloguchi, Bloom issue where you have to have cards in your deck with a specific card name. If they go to damage, if they're in your hand, if they go to drop, then you're kind of screwed, right? So it has that issue with it. Then it has a divine skill that says at the end of the battle of attacks, if you have a copy of her in drop, you can go ahead and ride her mid-battle, and then, you know, attack with her one less drives, which is okay. The other issue the deck has is that, you know, this restand is just once per game, and it just doesn't scale up in any way, shape, or form. She doesn't give her units power. She doesn't have any sort of way to just get higher in power. She hits a certain ceiling, right, which is like really like mid-low level ceiling, and then she kind of just stays there the rest of the game. She's pretty good in, like, you know, drawing cards and stuff like that. She's definitely a lot more slower paced deck, but yeah, she just doesn't do too much. She might do more in the future. It's a solid little deck, but it just doesn't, I feel like it just doesn't have enough to compete with everything else, but we'll see how things shake out. Virginia here, Varga or whatever you call it, but I'm just going to say Virginia, is a deck that we didn't know if we were going to get it in English, because it originally was missing from the number of cards, and then they revealed, like, no, change our mind, you're getting it. I don't know if there was some weird licensing issue, which is weird because they own this. This is from the Vanguard Manga, which is in the Koro comics, so it's kind of weird that they couldn't get the rights to something that they themselves created, but so this is a very, very strange and interesting deck. It will, for the most part, it'll just provide Dragon Empire with a new generic ride line, because the ride line says grade 1 Soul Blast to ride instead of discard, and then grade 2 when you ride any grade 3 over it, look at the top 7 for any grade 2 card, specific grade 2, add it to your hand. So pretty cool. Then the each version of the ride line has their own unique skill. Because the grade 1, he gets power for like each of your units. The grade 2, he can reveal the top card, from your ride deck. If you reveal a card with the same name as it, it can get a crit if you have a full board, essentially. And then this guy says he can Energy Blast, I think 3, to bind one of your units and I think call something from drop. And then when it attacks, it counterblast 1 to restand something. So it's a very strange, very strange deck. I actually have a pretty decent impression of it, to be honest. I'll rearrange these in between tiers after we're done, but very interesting little deck. It has a lot of like room to like do whatever you want. Sounds like something that should have probably been in Keter Sanctuary, just because of how generic it is, but you know, having something generic in Dragon Empire sounds pretty good too. Then we got ourselves, let's go over here, the Flame G Girls for Lyrical. I was really hyped about this deck when I saw it because they look so cool. And mechanically, they're not half bad. But after playtesting it for a bit, I'm not very impressed. It's kind of rough, to be totally honest with you. What this does is that it's one of those decks where it's like Showmont, where you need to have copies of your ride deck in the main deck, which is okay. I like that. It makes use of those cards. It says when the Vanguard attacks, if you have 3 different cards with the different archetype name of Flame G, you can then choose the grade 0 from your soul and ride it. It loses all its auto abilities for whatever reason, and then it gets 2k for every card in both you and your opponent's damage zone. This doesn't really add up to a lot, right? So if at most at the end of the game, where both me and my opponent have 5 cards in damage, that's plus 20, that means this card goes up to 26 because it's a grade 0 base. That's still a 1 card. You know, that's still a 1 to pass if you throw down a trigger from your opponent. Your opponent throws down a trigger. They could have really upped that up a lot. I think 5k, it would have been a huge number, but the fact that it's at, you know, the latest stage of the game, most decks hit pretty high numbers at that point. So yeah, and then the fact that they only have the ride deck as the cards to activate this effect, so you have to search them out. They have okay effects. The grade 1 says, I think after an attack, so you have to attack with the grade 1. You can retire her to countercharge. Then the grade 2 says you Soul Blast 1 to retire one of your opponent's units. So, Yeah, they have a lot of other interesting things, but I'm kind of not super impressed off the get-go. These two I was really hyped about and was really disappointed about, but I will definitely end up getting them and playing them, and I'm sure they'll get some good support in the future. Zorga we'll leave for last. We're just going to put this over here in the top already. Blandgmire is really good. I've probably spent the most time out of all of these testing on Blandgmire. Blandgmire is good. He's not the strongest thing that's ever happened to mankind. He's not going to end the game. You don't need to quit playing Vanguard or whatever. He's not that insane, but he's a really good card. He's a really strong card coming out the box compared to everything else. What he does is that he has really good generic cards that allow him to add cards to Soul with selective Soul Charging, so you can keep triggers in deck. But it also says when he attacks, you bind up to 4 cards from your Soul face down. Your opponent gets to bind 2 of them, or they're forced to bind 2 of them, I should say, of their own unit, so he has removal. And then also he gets 5k for every 2 cards bound, so he's a pretty hefty Vanguard swing. Then his Divine skill says that if you have 8 or more bound by face down bound, then he gets a crit. And for the rest of the turn, your opponent cannot use Sentinels from their hand. To combat this, Bushiroad has printed a bunch of different ways to guard that aren't Sentinels from your hand, which is pretty funny that they created this and instantly created counters for it. But then the last part of the skills is that if you get hit with this skill, your opponent, they lose. Your opponent, the player, lose any of the skills they got. So anything like says that you, the player, get this skill, they turn that off. It's nullified. And also the current Vanguard has their skills nullified as well. But you can very easily bypass this by just rewriting. So it's once per turn. The strongest part of this deck really is the selective Soul Charging, but also the Divine skill turning off Sentinels while it has a crit. So you kind of have to take this massive 70-something, 50-something K attack and hard guard it while they can check triggers, or just take it. That's probably the strongest part about this deck, which is no different than Zorga, who basically does the same gosh darn thing with his Roman Prison Dragons, and now they got a second one. So I think Zorga is going to be extremely good coming out of this. Zorga Nadir has 2 skills. It's just you can Alchemy Magic. You, I believe, Energy Blast 2 to call 2 cards from your drop. Then at the end of the turn, they're retired. And then it has a Divine skill where at the end of the battle at an attack, if your opponent's grade 3 or greater, stand, I think, a column and give it 5k. But it has pretty cool Zorga stuff where you Alchemy Magic with stuff in your bind zone instead now. So basically, you'll like play something from hand and use something you have bound. So you can constantly use the same order over and over again every time for your plays. So it's really cool. But that'll do it for all of the decks. Let's change these up a tiny bit. This is probably fine. I'll probably put Veleno up here, maybe here? Yeah, that sounds about right. For solid, put you 2 at the bottom. Put you up, put you probably over here. That looks about right to me. Then for sad, who is the most sad out of all of these? Honestly, it might be the Flame G Girls. This is like whatever. Eugene was also pretty disappointing, as was Flagburg. Everyone else I don't really care about. This is just sad because of the fact that it didn't get any extra support. Christianos' card is fine, it's just not super great. His card was kind of whatever, these were kind of whatever. I feel like this card is good, the support that Androld got. I'm just writing it off too much. So we'll put that there. There we go. Those are my first impressions for Divines Set 2. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, what you think of specifically what was supported, if you had any different thoughts, whatever the case may be. But till next time, take care of yourselves and each other, play Vanguard, and have yourselves a damn good one.